Have you ever stopped to wonder why people seem to be measured by such different standards? How some escape harsh criticism while others are scrutinized for every detail. These judgments shape friendships, break bonds, and even define how we see ourselves in the world. But what lies behind these perceptions? Perhaps what we judge in others reveals more about ourselves than we imagine. After all, what does this say about the meaning of life, about our own identity? These answers, though uncomfortable, may hold the key to understanding what drives us, and perhaps even to finding that elusive happiness. Ready to dive in? If so, let's get started. Judging others is often like looking into a poorly lit mirror. Carl Jung, a master of human psychology, introduced us to a provocative concept: psychological projection. Imagine criticizing someone for being arrogant, only to realize that this critique reflects a trait you reject in yourself. Unsettling, isn't it? The idea that we see in others what we cannot accept in ourselves is as intriguing as it is confronting. Perhaps your irritation with someone else's laziness says more about your own relationship with work than it does about them. Thinking about this changes everything, doesn't it? Now, consider how this projection shapes our view of life's meaning. For instance, someone who despises those chasing fame or wealth may be denying their own burning desire for recognition. It's as if the mind creates a curtain to protect our fragile identity and self-esteem, but this protection comes at a price. It keeps us from exploring our shadows and growing. A practical way to start identifying these projections is to pay attention to the criticisms you frequently make. What do they reveal about you? This reflection isn't about judging yourself further, but about opening the door to empathy for yourself and others. Understanding that our judgments are projections is liberating and connects us more authentically to reality. But what about judgments influenced by the environment in which we were raised? This brings us to another fascinating point. We are born as blank slates, but soon the words of a culture begin to fill our story. Every judgment we make carries traces of the environment we grew up in, our upbringing, and societal norms. Think about how views on morality differ across generations or regions. What seems wrong to you might be perfectly acceptable elsewhere. Culture shapes how we view others' identities, and, of course, our own. For example, someone raised in a setting where success equates to wealth might harshly judge those who choose a simpler life. But is this really a judgment of the other person, or a fear of not meeting cultural expectations? This influence extends to our notions of happiness and purpose. Have you noticed how the idea of living well is more often defined by society than by individual reflection? Start questioning these impositions. What truly matters to you? Understanding how culture affects our perceptions is like removing a blindfold. This clarity helps us avoid snap judgments and build deeper connections with those around us. But there's something even trickier: the power of first impressions. Let's explore the impact of that initial encounter. Have you ever found yourself forming an opinion about someone within the first few minutes of meeting them? Maybe it was their tone of voice, their clothing, or even a simple handshake. First impressions are powerful and can shape how we see someone for a long time. It's as if our brain takes a shortcut, trying to quickly decode reality and decide if we're safe or not. But is this initial evaluation fair? How often does it prevent us from truly getting to know someone? Think back to the last time you misjudged someone at first glance. Maybe you thought a soft-spoken person was shy, only to discover later that they were incredibly confident. This phenomenon is common because our minds love categorizing, using cultural references or past experiences to fill in the blanks. But human nature is far too complex to fit into instant labels. A practical tip to overcome this: give people a second chance. Allow yourself to look beyond that first impression. Reflecting on how first impressions shape our opinions is an exercise in humility. When we recognize that our initial perceptions may be wrong, we open the door to richer connections. However, there's an even more ingrained mental habit to address: attributing others' actions to personal traits while ignoring external factors. Let's explore this bias next. Humans love simple explanations for complex behaviors. When someone acts rudely, we tend to think it's because of their personality. They're just a rude person. Rarely do we consider that they might be dealing with personal struggles or having a bad day. This tendency to blame character over circumstances is known as the fundamental attribution error. Now think, how many times have you been misjudged because someone made this same snap judgment about you? For instance, if you see someone cutting in line at the supermarket, your immediate thought might be, what a selfish person. But what if that person is rushing home to care for a sick family member? Understanding this doesn't mean excusing bad behavior, but it does mean considering the role of context in shaping reality. A simple practice to avoid this error is asking yourself, what external factors might be influencing this behavior? This exercise builds empathy and helps us judge less. When we start questioning these impulses, we become more aware and less reactive. After all, how much do we really know about someone else's story? Empathy, then, becomes a powerful ally in helping us see beyond appearances. Empathy is more than putting yourself in someone else's shoes. It's about deeply understanding without premature judgments. Imagine listening to a friend share their struggles. Your first instinct might be to give advice, but practicing empathy means truly hearing them, trying to grasp what lies behind their words. It takes effort but transforms relationships. Empathy builds bridges between our identity and others, showing that we all share the same desires: happiness, acceptance, and belonging. Now, consider how this applies to everyday life. You're stuck in traffic, and someone cuts you off aggressively. Instead of getting angry, ask yourself, could this person be dealing with an emergency? This simple shift in perspective reduces stress and fosters compassion. Empathy isn't about condoning everything, but about understanding before reacting. A practical way to develop this skill is by practicing a pause moment before reacting. Take a deep breath and consider what might be driving the other person's behavior. Choosing empathy frees us from the weight of quick judgments and strengthens genuine connections. But modern society presents an additional challenge: social media. Social media amplifies quick judgments, giving them reach and permanence. A single mistake caught on video or a controversial opinion can go viral, leading to virtual mobbing. On these platforms, reality is often shaped by fragments of information, edited and shared until the context is lost. And what about the impact on identity? Many people feel pressured to project an idealized image, distorting their perception of themselves and what truly brings happiness. Think about how often you've judged someone based on a post. The lack of facial expressions, tone of voice, and context can turn harmless comments into something that seems offensive. This dynamic fuels a cycle of constant judgment and comparison. A practical way to counter this is to limit your time on social media and reflect before reacting to emotionally charged content. Additionally, focus on consuming content that fosters knowledge and connection rather than superficiality. Despite their potential negative impact, social media can also be tools for empathy and dialogue. It all depends on how we choose to engage. But before pointing fingers at the screen, it's crucial to look inward. After all, how we judge others often reflects how we see ourselves. Criticizing others often mirrors our insecurities. When we judge ourselves harshly, we're more likely to extend that same criticism to others. Self-judgment is a cycle that feeds constant comparison, eroding self-esteem and distorting our sense of identity. Someone who feels incapable, for instance, might criticize successful people, projecting their frustrations as a defense mechanism. But how do we break this pattern? Start by observing your inner dialogue. When you catch yourself thinking, "I'm not good enough," or "I can't do anything right," pause and question it. Is this critical voice really yours, or does it echo something you've heard before? Building healthy self-esteem is like nurturing a plant. It requires consistency and patience. A powerful practice is to write down 3 things you value about yourself every day. As we learn to be kinder to ourselves, our judgments of others naturally diminish. It's like adjusting a lens. The view becomes clearer and more balanced. To refine this perspective even further, tools like mindfulness can help keep our focus on the present. Mindfulness trains the mind to focus on the present moment without being swept away by automatic judgments. How often have you reacted to something without really thinking? Perhaps you criticized someone for behavior that, upon reflection, was insignificant. Mindfulness creates a pause between stimulus and response, enabling more thoughtful choices. A simple way to begin is with daily mindfulness exercises. Take 5 minutes to focus on your breathing, noticing the rhythm and sensations in your body. When thoughts arise, observe them without clinging to them. Over time, this practice strengthens your ability to analyze reality without prejudice or projection. Mindfulness isn't just a technique. It's a path to deeper connection with yourself and others. By slowing down and observing, you'll see that human nature is full of nuance, and this fosters compassion. Now that you understand how judgments are formed, it's time to take action. How many meaningful connections have you missed because of snap judgments? How many opportunities for growth slipped away because you didn't look deeper? Transformation begins with small changes. Practice empathy, question your perceptions, and above all, stay present. What will you do today to be less critical and more understanding? Why not start by noticing the automatic judgments that arise in your mind? And don't forget to share in the comments which of these insights resonated most with you. I'd love to hear how you plan to apply this in your daily life. Finally, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep learning about topics that transform how you connect with the world and yourself. This is just the beginning of an incredible journey.